Welcome to the Phantom Files, the podcast that dives into the uncharted realms of the paranormal in the Central California area. I'm your host, Michael Banty, and together we'll unravel the mysteries that haunt the world we live in. On this show, we invite individuals to call in or email their spine-tingling experiences with the supernatural. From ghostly apparitions to close encounters with UFOs and everything in between, we explore the bizarre and unexplained phenomena that defy our understanding. So grab a seat, dim the lights, and prepare to explore the enigmatic wonders of the unknown. The Phantom Files begins now. I love lake monsters. One of the earliest stories I ever read was Loch Ness Monster, Nessie. And from there I was hooked. And you have to imagine my surprise and my excitement when I heard that Fresno had its own lake monster, as this story will now describe.
This is a very true story. It was 1975. My wife and I were living in LA, and we went on a camping trip up to Millerton Lake. We ended up there just by accident. It was a weekday. We were the only people on the lake. It was a clear, beautiful day, and the water was calm and smooth as glass. We were both looking at the lake when suddenly there was a wake. And this large head comes up out of the water, then goes down in the water, and this huge back comes up and rolls down, following the head. Without a doubt, this creature was at least 30 feet or more. We didn't see the tail. It looked like a prehistoric monster. When you see photos of the Loch Ness Monster, this is what it looked like a dinosaur. We were in shock, and there was no one else there to yell out to. When the creature dived, there was a huge wake. The following day, we were leaving, and at that time, there was a log building with a gas pump. We wanted to gas up before leaving. I went in to pay, and as I was leaving, I noticed this bulletin board with news clips about different people seeing the monster. I felt greatly relieved seeing this, as I then knew we weren't going crazy. A few years ago, I tried to find something online concerning the monster at Lake Millerton. But it wasn't until recently I found your site. When you hear someone talk about a monster in Millerton Lake, it's very true. I was always puzzled how such a prehistoric monster could exist in a man-made lake. Is there an underground inlet from the ocean? I know it sounds crazy, but I'm at a loss. How such a thing could exist. My wife and I have lived in Las Vegas for the last 23 years. I have only told this story to a handful of people. I worked with a guy here in Vegas at the Venetian. He grew up in Fresno and told me he had heard stories about Millerton since he was a kid, but he didn't believe in the stories he heard. You know the old saying, seeing is believing.
That story right there isn't the only strange creature sighting that I have been told about in the Millerton Lake area. Over the years, I've received numerous accounts of people seeing either a large catfish, a large sturgeon, and I mean by large, I mean 6 feet, 7 feet, even 10 feet long, something that is not normal. Others have claimed to have seen something more like the Loch Ness Monster, like what this story talks about. Others have said they've seen what they call a dragon. I don't know what that means, but that's how it's been described to me. Not just Millerton Lake has a weird history. That whole Friant area that's part of Fresno County is weird. Just about a mile or so downstream from Millerton Lake on the San Joaquin River is a park called Lost Lake, and unfortunately, it has a very tragic history. Over the years, there have been numerous drownings at the park, and people have claimed to have seen the ghosts of those that drowned there. The real interesting story, and the one that I want to tie back into the Millerton Lake sighting, is these two people were fishing one night, and they heard a large splash, maybe 50 feet from them or so, 100 feet. It was really dark, but they shone their lights hoping they could see something. And the way it was described to me was something basically came out of the water and beached itself on the riverbank. It then stood up, and they described this creature as being maybe 4 feet tall or so. And they saw what they assumed was its head swivel from left to right and then back to left again as if it was looking for something. This went on for a couple of seconds. Then the creature got back on its belly and slithered back into the water and disappeared. Needless to say, these two were scared and they left. And that's still not the end of the weird stories in that area. The main road to get to both the Lost Lake Park and Millerton Lake is called Friant Road. Years ago, it was known for its traffic accidents, as it was a two-lane road that winded up into the foothills, and it was always traveled on no matter what the time of day or night, especially at night since there was a local casino nearby. And like I said, traffic accidents were well known, and there have been rumors of ghosts of the people that were killed on the road wandering into this day, as this next story is going to talk about.
I heard a story a few years ago about a phantom police officer that would pull over people who were speeding on Friant Road in Fresno County. The story begins with someone driving too fast when suddenly they see police lights flashing behind them, telling them to pull over. The driver does this and waits for the officer to appear. The officer walks up to the car and tells them they were going too fast and writes them a ticket and tells the driver to be careful in the future. When the driver goes to pay the fine, they are told by the police officer at the station that this type of ticket hasn't been used in years and asks them where they got it from. The driver tells the story of what happened, and the desk officer looks up the badge number written on the ticket. It turns out the police officer who wrote the ticket is deceased and had died on that stretch of road in a traffic accident several years ago. The story ends that he drives up and down it now to make sure what happened to him does not happen to others.
As with the creature stories that were mentioned before, this isn't the only ghost story I know of on Friant Road. The most popular one, I guess you could call it, is of a phantom cop pulling over people that are going too fast and giving them a ticket, and then speeding off, and they go to pay the ticket the next day, and the people at the police station are like, "Where'd you get this citation from? We don't use this kind of ticket anymore." And the people then say, "Well, this just cop, he pulled us over, he gave us his ticket." They looked up the number of the badge, and of course the police officer is no longer living, and it turns out he died on that road. It sounds more like an urban legend, but I've heard people tell me, "Hey, we've had this happen to us," or "We know people that this happened to us, where we've seen a cop car behind us, we pull over, and then the lights just disappear." That part is believable to me. The whole ticket thing is very much urban legend. A interesting urban legend, and one that has stuck around for years, it seems. All I know is that whole Millerton Lake, Lost Lake, that whole Friant area that's just 20 minutes outside of Fresno has a lot of weird things going on. I didn't even mention the UFOs that have been seen up there. That's for another time.
My wife is from Fresno, and between 2008 and 2012, I was in Fresno for holidays and weekends several times a year. All of those trips were mundane and uneventful, except something totally crazy happened one night in November 2011. It was about 8:30 p.m. on the Friday of Thanksgiving weekend, and we had just returned from a restaurant to my mother-in-law's house on East Sample. We were standing in the driveway, unloading our infant out of the car, and my wife spotted something odd in the sky and asked me what it was. I had never seen anything like it. It was a UFO. My mother-in-law's house was on the south side of the street, and the UFO was hovering low on the horizon, on the northeast edge of Fresno, basically just north of Clovis. The object was probably a couple miles away from us, so it was difficult to tell how big it was. But the most remarkable thing about it were the peculiar blue lights that seemed to flash in a bizarre pattern, and the movements were astonishing. At first, it just hovered, but then it suddenly zigzagged, fast, erratically, abruptly, banking and turning. It was completely silent. From our angle, the object appeared to be a blue cylinder, cigar-shaped. The sighting lasted for maybe 2 minutes, and then it lowered below the horizon and out of our sight. I have never seen a UFO before or since that night. So what was it? It could certainly have been a secret U.S. military aircraft. As goofy as it sounds, the only other possible explanation would be an alien spaceship. To this day, my wife refuses to talk about it.
So this story is interesting for a couple of reasons. One, the sheer size of this object had to have been large. The witness states that it was a couple miles away, at least from his reckoning, and that he could tell that it was a cigar-shaped craft and that there were blue lights on it. To discern those details at that distance, the thing had to have been rather large. At first I thought, okay, this is, the Fresno police helicopter. The first time I saw that in the sky, I did also see blue flashing lights, but as I got close to it, I also saw the red. But the way he described it flying around, like just zigzagging and banking and going real fast, no helicopter can do that. Maybe a drone, I don't know, but back then were drones around that could do that? I don't think so. Whatever it was, it definitely spooked a person. I wonder if anybody else saw it. This next story is a little bit south of Fresno, but still in the Central California area. It actually involves another one of my favorite stories, this time a haunted road, and as in the case with this story, it involves a phantom motorcycle.
November 1974, around 7 at night on a weeknight, my cousins and a friend of theirs were standing around talking. Their friend brought up this thing called the motorcycle ghost light in Exeter, California. I had never heard of it, so we jumped in his car to investigate. The night was becoming foggy. We drove down Lover's Lane in Visalia, south to Walnut Avenue, turned left on Walnut, and headed east. We drove about 7 to 8 miles in the darkness on that dark, desolate 2-lane country road. Nothing but walnut orchards, oak trees, and eeriness, with a home scattered here and there. We were the only car on the road, got all the way to the Exeter Cemetery on the right, and saw nothing. We turned around to come back. About 1 to 2 miles coming back on Walnut, I turned around to have one last look. I was sitting in the back seat on the driver's side. I looked and saw a large yellowish light at telephone pole level, about 100 feet behind us and following us. I yelled at the driver to turn the car around. He did, and the chase was on. The light fell away at a rapid speed back towards the east, lost sight momentarily as we sped down the road to chase it. Saw it again behind us, so turned car around and gave chase. This time, it was a reddish taillight sort of light about 3 feet off the ground. The driver was driving at least 80 miles an hour, and the light effortlessly stayed in front of us about 50 feet or so ahead. This went on for about 20 minutes. We chased it up and down the road. Sometimes a yellowish motorcycle headlight, kind of dim, and sometimes a reddish motorcycle taillight light. Finally, chasing it back to the west again, it winked out. We stopped the car, and it idled as we sat there looking around. Then I saw it. Off to the left there was a reddish taillight, sort of ball of light, hovering about 3 feet off the ground and about 50 feet to our left in a young walnut orchard. We sat there in silence for a few seconds. Then I said, "You guys want to get out and go over there?" Suddenly my cousin yelled out, "It's time for dinner!" So we left. At later times we came out and saw it, but nothing as dramatic as the first time. Since then, many others have reported seeing it. I used to believe it was a ghost, but now, after much study of the subject of ghosts, spirits, the occult, and the Bible, I am convinced it was a demon messing with us and others who have seen and chased it. It is very dangerous to chase it because you can lose sight of your surroundings and other traffic or cross traffic as you chase this thing. And today, there is a lot of residential development out on that road. It is no longer a lonely, dark 2-lane country road in the country as we called it.
Is this another urban legend, or is the story real? I don't know. All I know is I have heard about this story for years, at least 20, and talking to people. Some say it actually happens in Tulare, not Exeter, but they're really close to each other, so I can see how the legend kind of drifts around. It's a phantom road out of the middle of nowhere. I can see it's interchangeable, so to speak. I don't know if it's real. I've never been down there myself. I've always wanted to, never really had the chance. Um, I just know that there's a story there. It's been around since at least the 40s, from what I've been told, and I really think it's going to be around for a lot longer. Do you have a story to share? We'd love to hear from you. Call the Weird Fresno hotline at 559-481-1057 or email me at weirdfresno@gmail.com and share your eerie encounter. Your story to be featured on an upcoming episode, allowing you to connect with a community of fellow truth seekers and enthusiasts of the unexplained. When I'm asked about what are some of the good things about living in the Fresno area, I always like to bring up Yosemite. We are literally an hour and a half away from one of the best national parks, at least in my opinion. And like any other place, it has its stories. The Awani Hotel is said to be haunted. The Merced River is supposed to be haunted as well. There have been numerous Bigfoot sightings over the years, and even the infamous Fresno Nightcrawler has supposedly been seen up there. But this story that I'm about to share is a little bit different. It's kind of creepy, not gonna lie. Also, at the very end, there's a bit of mention of cattle mutilations, so I want to give a trigger warning just in case anything like that uh, can upset people. It does get a little graphic, but not too much, and I will actually touch more on that after the story. So, give it a listen.
I found your site tonight and have been going through it for a couple of hours. I don't live down there anymore, but am a Madera native as well. The site is awesome. Anyways, I had a story that happened to me in 1992 in Yosemite. I looked through your Yosemite tags but didn't see anything similar. I was staying in a cabin at the Redwoods right by the Ahwahnee with my family and girlfriend. We were on a walk at around 10 p.m. along the Merced River. We were walking back up a trail from the river and saw a couple standing along the trail looking up at the moon. They were dressed in bathrobes and embracing each other. There was a strange blue glow around them that, at the time, I thought was just the moonlight. As we passed them, the man said, "Beautiful night, isn't it?" And we both got an eerie chill. We walked past them, and after a while, my girlfriend and I looked at each other with a WTF expression. We turned back to look at them, and they were still glowing and floating about a foot off the ground, still staring up at the moon. We ran all the way back to the cabin scared to death. I know what I saw that night, and it was not two living beings. Also, you have no idea how many cattle mutilations occur in Madera. The ranchers do not want the attention, so they are all unreported. I know one rancher that loses 2 to 4 steers a year, always not a drop of blood in or around the steer, and the sex organs are removed with precision. Happens out on the west end between Madera and Firebaugh. But you didn't hear that from me.
Great story, right? But I want to touch a bit on the whole cattle mutilation thing. I'm on the fence with that whole quote-unquote phenomena. I really think a lot of the cases are just cows dying and then scavengers come literally like right after the animal passes and they do their thing as a scavenger. Now, the whole blood thing not being seen, blood tends to pool at the bottom of the carcass. I apologize if I'm upsetting anybody. I'm trying not to be graphic, excuse me, but I want to be descriptive as well and try to explain what I think it is. The blood pools at the bottom of the carcass and coagulates, and that's pretty much why you don't see any blood around the area. It's not going to be a messy situation. These animals know what they're doing. If it's a vulture or if it's a coyote or just even a stray dog, they know what to do. That being said, I don't think all mutilations are mundane. There's been stories of ranchers seeing their cow coming back 20 minutes later and the thing is, well, I'll just say mutilated. No tracks, no signs of anybody around, no nothing. No way to explain it. That's pretty weird. Now, what this person said about the ranchers in Madera not talking about it, I don't know. Most probably just don't want to make a fuss over it, even if it is a weird situation. But might be something I want to look into in the future. I have another haunted road story. This time it takes place in Madera County, up near Corsgold and the Chansey Casino on Highway 41. And if you could not tell by the other two stories, I really, really like haunted roads. I don't know why. I think because they've always been around since mankind has traveled. It's not a modern thing. It didn't start with cars and motorcycles and paved roads. There's stories in England and elsewhere, really, of people seeing stagecoaches and carriages running down the road late at night. Sometimes they didn't have horses with them, sometimes they did, but it was always an apparition. It's just, like I said, it's always been a thing since we've traveled. And this story I find very interesting. So give it a listen. Let me know what you think.
So my friend and I were on our way to the Chukchansi Casino the morning after Halloween around 1:30 a.m. I know that fact alone would sound like a fake story, but I promise you I'm not making this up at all. We were about 4 to 5 minutes away from the casino when going around a wide bend on the road, next to a mountain, we saw a human figure appear out of what seemed nowhere and looked to be jogging on our right side. What really was odd is that not only was I, and to a point my friend, although he was driving, looking down that area and the figure appeared on our side in a flash, meaning we would have seen it from far away, but instead it just appeared next to us and was gone just as fast. We both screamed, and he slightly swerved, but we kept on driving, barely able to believe what we saw. From what I saw, it was what looked like a man jogging. I could see what seemed like he was wearing a t-shirt, mainly because it seemed like the color of its chest area was a different color than the arms. I'm pretty sure I saw a ponytail, but the odd part was the face seemed completely dark. My friend said he saw the same, but that he thought it was wearing a hoodie, and couldn't see the face, which was black as well. He also immediately looked in the rearview mirror and said he didn't see a thing, and that considering how fast he looked, he should have seen it running. Also, this is worth mentioning. We were at the time talking about paranormal things before this happened. I can't remember exactly what we were saying, but we were pretty much making fun of sightings of wolf-like creatures in Fresno. So yeah, I'm not sure what we saw, and it's possible we saw a person jogging, but it was 1:30 a.m., very cold, and considering there was maybe 2 to 3 feet between us and the mountain, if it was a person jogging, they very possible could have been hit by a car. So why jog in the pitch black?
Interesting story, right? Did you catch that part at the end about the wolf-like creatures? Remember the last podcast, the Watts Valley wolf ape? Other people have seen wolf-like creatures in the area, not just in Watts Valley. I don't know where these people heard the stories, but others have told me they've actually seen stuff like this up in the Corsgold area. in the foothills. Sometimes the creatures are seen running along the cars. Sometimes they're seen off in the distance. But it makes you wonder what's out there. That's going to do it for now, I think. This podcast was written and produced by Michael Banty and is a Weird Fresno production. Any media used in this podcast is done so under the protection of fair use. Make sure to check out all my social medias on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And thank you once again for listening, everybody. Remember, stay weird out there.